The conference room at Novatech's San Francisco headquarters fell deathly silent as Mark Thompson clicked to the final slide, claiming Presley Harper's revolutionary AI algorithm as his own breakthrough. What they didn't know was that Presley Harper, the only openly lesbian engineer in the entire corporation, had already set in motion a chain of events that would expose every lie, every theft, and every betrayal lurking in the shadows of their cutthroat world. Presley sat at the far end of the polished mahogany table, her fingers gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles turned white. The presentation was flawless, too flawless. Mark's voice boomed with confidence as he detailed the AI platform designed to optimize renewable energy distribution across the national grid, promising billions in cost savings and a 40% drop in carbon emissions. It was her idea. Her code. Her 2 years of sleepless nights spent in the lab while Kiara, her girlfriend, brought her coffee and offered quiet encouragement. Yet here it was rebranded as Team Thompson's innovation, with her authorship log scrubbed clean and her name erased like it had never existed. The room erupted in applause from the executive team. CEO Richard Langford nodded approvingly, already calculating the stock bump this would deliver. Presley's eyes scanned the faces around the table. Derek, the data analyst who had always resented her promotions. Liam, the junior developer who had copied her notes without credit more times than she could count. And then there was the observer section, where Kiara sat with her notebook open, her expression carefully neutral. Their relationship was public in their personal lives. Presley had never hidden that she was lesbian and proud of the woman she loved, but inside Novatech's glass towers, she had learned to keep the hand-holding to a minimum. Being the only woman in engineering who dared to bring her girlfriend to company picnics had already made her a target. Now it seemed the target had grown large enough to swallow her entire career. As the meeting broke, Presley rose, her tailored navy suit hugging her athletic frame, her dark hair pulled into a sleek professional bun. She approached Mark with measured steps. "Impressive presentation, Mark. Almost like you wrote every line yourself." He smirked, adjusting his tie. "Thanks, Presley. Hard work pays off, right? The board is thrilled. This could mean a huge bonus for the team." "The team?" she repeated, her voice low and steady. "Funny how my name disappeared from the authorship logs overnight." Mark's eyes narrowed, the smile never leaving his face. "Careful, Harper. Accusations like that could ruin your reputation, especially with your personal situation. Investors don't like distractions. Let's not make this ugly." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Presley felt the familiar chill she had learned to live with. The subtle homophobia that Novatech wrapped in corporate speak about family values and client comfort. She was the diversity poster child until the moment her brilliance threatened someone else's bonus. She glanced toward the door where Kiara lingered, pretending to check her phone. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that glance Presley saw everything. Love, fear, and the silent agreement they had made to protect each other's futures. That evening, in their sunlit loft apartment overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, Presley collapsed onto the leather couch. Kiara, her long blonde hair loose and her green eyes soft with worry, knelt in front of her and took both hands. "Tell me what happened," she said gently. Presley recounted the meeting, her voice cracking only once. When she finished, Kiara pulled her into a warm embrace, their foreheads touching in the quiet way they had perfected over 3 years together. "I'm so sorry, love. But maybe it's not worth the fight. We have each other. We can start over somewhere smaller. Somewhere we don't have to measure every smile." Presley shook her head against Kiara's shoulder. "No. This is my legacy. And I prepared for this." She didn't reveal the full details yet, but in her mind the system she had built was already humming to life. Months earlier, sensing the jealousy that rippled through the department every time she outperformed the men while openly loving another woman, Presley had woven a hidden layer into the AI's core architecture. It was a digital sentinel. Any unauthorized access, any metadata change, any export without her private authorization key would trigger encrypted data packets to a server only she controlled. Timestamps, IP addresses, even screen recordings of their late-night sessions, it was all captured. She had hoped never to use it. Survival, however, had its own logic. The next morning at her desk in the open-plan engineering floor, Presley logged in casually. While the rest of the team celebrated with catered breakfast, She typed a short command disguised as routine maintenance. By lunchtime, her private tablet vibrated once in her pocket. The first logs had arrived. Mark had downloaded the entire codebase at 11:45 p.m. the night before the meeting. Derek had altered the metadata at 2:17 a.m. Liam had run a test export at dawn. Every move documented, every betrayal timestamped. Presley stared at the screen, heart steady now. The evidence was ironclad. But as the data kept arriving, so did the weight of the decision. Exposing this would ignite a corporate firestorm that could burn her own career to the ground. Worse, it could drag Kiara into the glare of public scrutiny, forcing their private love into boardroom discussions and tabloid headlines. Was her ambition worth risking the one person who made every sacrifice worthwhile? As the week unfolded, the team pushed the stolen project forward, scheduling a major investor pitch for the following month. Presley played along, attending strategy sessions with a calm smile that never reached her eyes. Behind the scenes, she analyzed every new log, piecing together the full conspiracy. It was not random theft. The three men had coordinated via group chats and deleted emails her system had still captured. Their motive was crystal clear. They saw her as the obstacle, the lesbian engineer whose results made them look ordinary. Stealing the project would let them claim the glory and quietly push her out. Kiara noticed the change during their Friday night dinner dates. "You're distant," she said one evening over sushi, her hand resting on Presley's knee beneath the tablecloth. "If this is about the project, let it go. We can move on." Presley wanted to confide everything, but the words stuck in her throat. "It's not that simple. This is bigger than us." She had no idea how right she was. The next log that arrived showed Liam attempting to sell fragments of the code to a competitor. The betrayal was deeper, wider, and more dangerous than she had imagined. And the system was only just getting started. By the end of the second week, the logs had become a flood. Presley sat in her apartment at 2 a.m., tablet glowing in the dark while Kiara slept in the next room. Each new entry felt like another knife twist. Mark forwarding the full dataset to an anonymous Dropbox account. Derek editing the patent application to list himself as primary inventor. Liam bragging in a private Slack channel about finally getting what we deserve. The system she had installed was merciless in its precision, recording not only actions but context, screen brightness levels, mouse movements, even the exact second someone paused to delete a file. It was beautiful in its cold logic, the same logic that had once made her the youngest lead engineer in Novatech history. She closed the tablet and walked to the bedroom doorway, watching Kiara's steady breathing. 3 years ago they had met at a tech conference in Austin. Presley had been presenting her early research. Kiara had been covering the event for a Silicon Valley blog. Their first conversation had lasted until the bar closed, and their first kiss had happened on a hotel balcony under Texas stars. From that night forward, Kiara had been the only person who saw the woman behind the code. The woman who laughed too loud at bad puns and cried at documentaries about climate change. Now that same love was the one thing holding Presley back from pressing the button that would detonate everything. The next morning at Novatech, tension thickened the air. Mark called an emergency team huddle. "Investors want a demo next week," he announced, eyes sliding over Presley. "We need every hand on deck. Harper, you'll handle documentation, make sure it's clean." Presley smiled thinly. Of course. Wouldn't want any loose ends. Later in the elevator, Derek cornered her. "Heard you had questions after the big reveal. Smart move keeping quiet. Would be a shame if certain personal details leaked to HR. You know how the board feels about distractions." Presley met his gaze without flinching. "Threats are beneath you, Derek. Or maybe they're exactly your level." The doors opened and she stepped out, heart racing but steps measured. Back at her desk, she opened a new encrypted folder and began compiling the evidence into a single dossier. She still hadn't decided when or if to release it. Every scenario she ran ended with the same variables: ruined careers, possible lawsuits, and Kiara's dream of launching her own consulting firm vanishing in the smoke. That evening Kiara came home early, carrying takeout Thai and a bottle of their favorite Pinot. "Talk to me," she said, setting the bags down. "You're carrying something heavy, and I can feel it." Presley hesitated, then told her about the logs, omitting only the full scope of the system. Kiara listened, eyes widening. When Presley finished, Kiara reached across the table and took her hand. This is huge. But think about what happens after. The company will spin it. They'll say you're bitter. That you're using our relationship as leverage. We fought too hard to get here. Presley felt the familiar tug-of-war inside her chest. Love versus the burning need to prove she could not be erased. What if staying silent means I let them win? What kind of future do we build on that? They talked late into the night, voices soft, hands intertwined. Kiara's ambition was quieter than Presley's but no less real. She wanted her own firm. A place where no one would ever question her choices again. Presley understood. She also understood that silence might buy them safety but would cost her soul. Monday brought the first crack in the thieves' confidence. Liam arrived late, pale and jittery, muttering about weird system glitches. Mark snapped at him in the break room. Presley watched from her monitor, the hidden logs confirming they were starting to panic. Her system had begun leaving subtle digital footprints, tiny delays in their builds, phantom error messages only they could see. Nothing traceable, just enough to make them question their own competence. By Wednesday the paranoia was spreading. Derek pulled Presley aside in the parking garage. Whatever game you're playing, stop. We can cut you in 10% of the patent royalties. Walk away rich and quiet. Presley looked at him for a long moment. You stole my life's work and now you want to buy my silence? The price is higher than you think. She walked away before he could answer, but the offer lingered like poison. 10% would be life-changing money. Enough for her and Kiara to start fresh anywhere. Yet the thought of accepting felt like swallowing glass. That night Kiara sensed the shift. You're considering it, aren't you? She asked quietly while they washed dishes side by side. Presley dried her hands and turned. I'm considering everything, including what it would cost us if I don't. Kiara stepped close, resting her forehead against Presley's. Whatever you decide, I'm here. But promise me one thing, don't become them. Don't let ambition turn you cold. The promise was harder to make than Presley expected, because deep down, the system was already moving toward its next phase, and she wasn't sure she could stop it even if she wanted to. The investor pitch was set for the following Tuesday in the main auditorium, complete with live demo and press. Novatech had flown in venture capitalists from New York and London. Mark strutted the halls like a man who already owned the future. Presley watched him from across the open floor, her expression unreadable. Inside her tablet, the dossier had grown to 200 pages of irrefutable proof. One command in every executive inbox, every major tech journalist, and the SEC whistleblower portal would receive the same package at the exact same second. She still hadn't sent it. Instead, she spent the weekend at home with Kiara, trying to pretend life was normal. They cooked paella, watched old movies, made love with the kind of tenderness that only comes when both people know the ground beneath them might shift at any moment. Sunday afternoon they walked along the Embarcadero. Fingers laced despite the occasional stare. I love you, Kiara said suddenly, stopping under a street lamp. No matter what happens in that room on Tuesday. Presley kissed her right there, public and unafraid, because something still mattered more than optics. Monday brought the first real crisis. An anonymous email arrived in Presley's work inbox at 6:17 a.m. The subject line read, "Walk away." The body contained a single screenshot. A photo of her and Kiara kissing at last year's company holiday party, taken from an angle that suggested it had been saved from security footage. The message was clear. Someone inside Novatech knew about the system and was willing to fight dirty. Presley forwarded the email to her private server, then deleted it from her work account. She didn't panic. Panic was a luxury she could no longer afford. Instead, she added the new threat to the dossier and activated the next layer of her failsafe. A secondary tracker that began logging every keystroke on Mark's, Derek's, and Liam's machines. By noon she had their frantic group chat. She knows. We need to shut her down before the pitch. The cold calculation settled over her like frost. They were no longer just thieves. They were actively plotting to destroy her reputation using the very thing she had never hidden. Her love for Kiara. That evening Kiara came home to find Presley at the kitchen island surrounded by printed logs. It's worse than I thought. Presley said quietly. They're threatening to out us using company security footage. Kiara's face paled, but her voice stayed steady. Then we fight. Together. They spent the night planning. Kiara, with her journalist background, suggested leaking select documents to trusted reporters the moment the full exposure hit. Presley mapped the exact timing. Right as Mark began his opening remarks on Tuesday, the system would flood the internal servers first, then external media. No one would be able to spin it fast enough. Yet as midnight approached, doubt crept in. Kiara sat across from her, eyes tired but determined. If we do this, your career at Novatech is over. Mine might be collateral damage. Are we ready for that? Presley reached for her hand. I'm ready if you are. But I need to know you won't regret choosing me over everything else. Kiara's answer was a kiss that tasted of salt and certainty. I chose you the day we met. Everything else is just scenery. Tuesday morning the auditorium buzzed with energy. Investors in tailored suits filled the front rows. Mark stood at the podium, PowerPoint ready, sweat already beading at his hairline. Presley took her seat in the second row, tablet in her lap, finger hovering over the final command. Mark began his speech with practice charm. Today we unveil the future of clean energy. Presley pressed send. The lights flickered once as the internal network convulsed. Every screen in the building suddenly displayed the same headline. Project theft, full evidence attached. Emails poured into inboxes. The live demo feed cut to security footage of Mark downloading files at midnight. Derek's metadata edits played in a looping GIF. Liam's attempted sale to a competitor scrolled in real time. Gasps rippled through the room. Mark froze at the podium, face draining of color. Richard Langford stood so quickly his chair toppled. Security guards appeared at the back exits. Presley remained seated, calm for the first time in weeks. The system had done its job perfectly. Cause and effect, clean and merciless. But as chaos erupted around her, she felt Kiara's hand slip into hers from the seat behind. One squeeze. One reminder that victory always carried a price. Chaos did not arrive politely. Within 90 seconds the auditorium became a storm of raised voices and ringing phones. Investors demanded answers. Board members shouted for damage control. Mark tried to speak, but the live feed had already switched to a split screen of his own deleted emails confessing the theft. The words, "We take it, she's out, problem solved," hung in giant letters behind him like a guilty verdict. Presley stood slowly, tablet tucked under her arm, and walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for her the way water parts for a blade. When she reached the microphone, Mark stepped back as if burned. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, voice carrying without amplification. "My name is Presley Harper. I created the algorithm you came here to celebrate. What you just witnessed is the consequence of 3 men deciding my work, and my life, were theirs to take." She let the words settle, then continued. "The system I installed months ago has now delivered every piece of evidence to the SEC, to our legal department, and to every major tech publication. There will be no spin. There will be no quiet settlements. There will only be truth." Richard Langford approached the stage, face thunderous. "Harper, my office. Now." Presley met his gaze. "With pleasure. But the press is already outside. I suggest we all choose our next words carefully." The next 4 hours were a blur of conference rooms, lawyers, and stunned silence. Mark, Derek, and Liam were escorted from the building by security, their access cards deactivated mid-stride. Presley sat in the CEO's office while external counsel reviewed the dossier. Kiara waited in the lobby, refusing to leave. When the lawyers finally nodded, Richard turned to Presley. "You've cost the company millions in market value today. But you've also handed us a scandal we can't bury. What do you want?" Presley's answer was immediate. "My name restored on every patent. Full credit in every press release. And a public apology to every employee who has ever been told their personal life makes them less valuable." Richard laughed bitterly. "You're asking for the moon." "No," Presley replied. "I'm asking for what was already mine." By evening the story had broken everywhere. Lesbian engineer's hidden system exposes corporate theft, trended on every platform. Kiara's phone rang nonstop with interview requests. Presley's inbox filled with messages from other women in tech, some thanking her, some warning her that she had just made powerful enemies. That night in their apartment, the adrenaline finally crashed. Kiara held her while she cried for the first time since the boardroom. "I did it," Presley whispered. "I actually did it." "You did," Kiara answered, stroking her hair. "But the fight isn't over." She was right. The next morning, Novatech issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging irregularities and promising an internal review. No mention of Presley's name. No apology. The stock continued to slide. Worse, anonymous accounts began posting old photos of Presley and Kiara, captioned with slurs and conspiracy theories. The threats had escalated from inside the company to the wider internet. Kiara's consulting clients started canceling meetings. Presley's security badge still worked, but the stares in the hallways had changed from resentment to outright fear. In the middle of it all, Kiara received a private offer from a rival firm. Triple her current rate, if she would quietly distance herself from the scandal. She showed Presley the email that night. "Are you tempted?" Presley asked, voice small. Kiara deleted the message without answering. But the deletion itself felt like a small betrayal. A moment where ambition whispered louder than loyalty. Presley saw it and said nothing. Some wounds were too fresh to name. The board called an emergency meeting on Friday. Presley was not invited, yet her system, still running silently in the background, fed her every word through the compromised conference line. She listened from her apartment while Kiara made tea in the kitchen. Richard's voice crackled through the speakers. "She's a liability now. The press won't let this die. We need to contain it." Another board member countered. "Fire her and we look guilty. Promote her and we look weak." A third voice, female, one of the few, spoke up. "She just proved she's the smartest person in the building. Maybe we should be asking how we lost her trust in the first place." The debate raged for 40 minutes. In the end, they voted to offer Presley a senior director position with a substantial raise and a seat at the patent strategy table. The condition, delivered through legal counsel that afternoon, was simple. Keep future personal disclosures to a minimum and sign a new NDA covering the entire incident. Presley read the offer twice, then slid the document across the table to Kiara. "They want me to go back in the closet for a paycheck." Kiara's jaw tightened. "Then don't sign." But the alternative was walking away from the company she had helped build, from the project that still carried her DNA even if the credit was now public. Ambition and love wrestled inside her again, bloody and unrelenting. She spent the weekend weighing options. Kiara supported whatever she chose. Yet Presley caught her staring at the rival firm's offer more than once. On Sunday night they argued for the first time in months. "You're asking me to choose between my career and our life," Kiara said, voice rising. "I supported the exposure. I stood by you. But now the world is watching and my business is bleeding." Presley's reply was quiet but sharp. "And I'm asking you to choose me the way I chose us when I pressed that button." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. They slept on opposite sides of the bed, backs turned, the distance measured in inches and unresolved fear. Monday morning, Presley walked into Richard's office without knocking. She placed the unsigned offer on his desk. "I'll take the title and the raise. But the NDA stays in your drawer. If you want my brain, you get all of me, openly, proudly, and without apology. Otherwise I walk, and I take every line of that AI with me to the highest bidder." Richard studied her for a long moment. "You're playing hardball." "No," Presley answered. "I'm playing the only game that was ever fair." He signed the revised contract on the spot. When she left the office, the entire engineering floor stood and applauded. Some out of respect, others out of fear. She accepted the recognition with a nod, then went straight to Kiara's favorite cafe and waited. Kiara arrived 20 minutes later, eyes red. She sat down and slid an envelope across the table. Inside was her resignation from the rival offer and a simple note. "You were right. I choose us." They cried in the middle of the cafe. Two women who had survived corporate war and come out still holding each other's hands. 6 months later, Novatech's stock had recovered. The AI platform was live in 3 states, and Presley's name appeared on every patent. She now led the entire sustainability division with a team that included 3 new female engineers who no longer felt the need to hide their personal lives. Mark, Derek, and Liam faced civil suits and criminal referrals. The last Presley heard, they were negotiating plea deals in different states. Kiara's consulting firm had launched anyway, smaller but entirely her own. Their loft was the same, but the atmosphere inside had changed. Quieter, more deliberate, as if both women understood how close they had come to losing everything that mattered. One crisp autumn evening they stood on their balcony watching the sunset paint the bridge gold. Kiara leaned against Presley's back, arms wrapped around her waist. "Do you ever regret pressing send?" she asked softly. Presley turned in her arms until they faced each other. "I regret the nights I doubted us. I regret every second I considered letting them win. But pressing send? Never. Because it forced me to choose what I was willing to lose, and what I refused to live without." Kiara kissed her slowly, the kind of kiss that promised tomorrow would still belong to them. Below, the city lights began to flicker on, indifferent to the private victories won in glass towers and quiet apartments. Yet as they stood there, Presley couldn't shake the final truth she had learned in the fire. Survival in their world demanded cold decisions, but love demanded something colder still. The willingness to risk everything and still choose each other when the smoke cleared. True or false? In the relentless pursuit of power and success, can genuine love between two women truly endure without one eventually choosing ambition over the other?